Central African time. Now, the 3-day 12th annual South Africa Institute of Taxation, Tax Indaba, wrapped up this afternoon, bringing together South Africa's leading tax experts. There were policymakers as well in attendance, some industry professionals too. And this is all against a backdrop of rising national debt and economic stagnation. The Indaba served as a critical platform for dialogue on a bold tax reform, which is what South Africa has stated that it needs. With South Africa's fiscal future hanging in the balance, this year's event marked a pivotal moment in shaping the national conversation around sustainable economic policy. Let's gain some insights on exactly what it is that transpired and some of the key highlights coming out of the summit. And for this, we're joined by the acting Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the South African Institute of Taxation, that's Keitumetse Sesana. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you for having me, Thami. I look forward to unpacking this topic with you.
No, first and foremost, how would you sum up the Indaba's engagement since it started on the 11th of August?
I think it was a resounding success. This year's Indaba obviously was against the backdrop of a budget that was failed to be delivered not once, not twice. We only got it right the third time. So it's been quite a crazy fiscal year that we have seen this year. So the Indaba is then presupposed upon those specific instances. We had together, as well as you mentioned in your introduction, that we pulled not only industry leaders, we pulled solo practitioners, as well as policymakers, both from National Treasury and from SARS, to engage in active dialogue as to how taxpayers and tax practitioners can assist with alleviating not only the SARS but the Treasury with the needed funding that is required to keep the country going.
Tax reform, that's a key buzzword and buzz phrase as far as tax in the country is concerned. Could you point out for us some of the key tax reform proposals that came out of the Indaba and those that you believe could have the biggest impact on South Africa's economy, and this obviously in the backdrop of the heavy debt that the country is in?
Excellent question. So although we didn't completely unpack the various types of reforms that we require, it was an active dialogue as what SARS and National Treasury could do. We know that the draft tax bills are going to be coming out imminently from the National Treasury, which sets out proposals as to what SARS and Treasury intend on amending technically in the legislation in order to close loopholes of base erosion or stripping the fiscus of money that is due to it. What we did discuss, though, is how tax practitioners and taxpayers are enabled to work collaboratively with SARS that the right amount of tax is paid. We did tinker. There was a particular panel discussion on the first day where we had the Director General of Tax and Financial Policy from the National Treasury, Mr. Chris Axelson, unpack for us why the VAT, for example, was used as a way to fund the fiscus. We looked at things like the high net worth individuals. Could a wealth tax be something that is on the card? And notwithstanding all the different types of reforms we discussed, the main theme that came out is that we could be raising taxes. We could be taxing our way out of growth. What we need to do now is enable everybody to collect the right amount of tax to ensure that everybody pays their fair share.
How did the discussions address the challenge of the really high tax burden that the country has? And I ask this in relative to government benefits.
So we did discuss even in the first day where we had the broader topics. There was a topic there about budget and tax reform. Which way do we go? We do understand that, especially in Budget 3.0, the minister did announce that there's going to be an exercise undertaken to unlock about 312 billion rand in wasteful and unfruitful expenditure that is taking place. And those sorts of discussions were had as to what exactly taxpayers can do to fund or assist government in order to unlock those types of funding in order to drive funding for the economy. What we do note there is that there are very high tax to GDP ratios in South Africa. It's not looking very good. And we use about 22 cents every rand to fund debt service costs. It was brought out from the discussion with Mr. Chris Axelson that this is a trajectory, even the keynote address from the Deputy Commissioner, Dr. Makubu, that this is not a trajectory that we need to be on as a nation. And therefore, even though there are government, benefits and expenditure, we are comforted to see the Treasury is looking at how to strip out all that wasteful expenditure and reduce on that. But the conversations that we had around was how we as taxpayers and practitioners can assist National Treasury and SARS to unlock and educate our clients that the right amount of tax is paid and that they can collect it in order to fund the fiscus.
And that's so important that you're pointing out there, Keitumetse, the role that tax practitioners play in helping clients navigate the complexities of the tax environment. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that, some of the other advice that came out in relation to that?
So from a tax practitioner perspective, obviously legislating in terms of Section 240 of the Tax Administration Act that we need to be registered with SARS in order for us to provide advice. In fact, Thami, there was a case in Cape Town recently where there was a bogus tax practitioner who's providing advice to a client, stripped the fiscus of 60,000 rand, and SARS took that person to court, and direct imprisonment of 3 years was meted out in that case. So it's essential that tax practitioners are not only above board with their own taxes, which is something we brought out from this Indaba this year, but they need to assist their clients to be compliant and pay the right amount of taxes. So the topics that we had unpacked, not only from a broader perspective, but on day 2, we honed in on specific technical aspects of corporate and international tax. Today, we looked at personal income tax and tax administration to equip them with the knowledge that they need so they can service their clients. For example, today we had a panel discussion on Section 164 of the Tax Administration Act that deals with the concept of paying now and arguing later. We had SARS officials on that panel. As you know, currently, Thami, what happens is that SARS will, effectively wake up in the morning and taxpayers realize that money is gone from their bank accounts because SARS has taken it. If you are objecting an assessment from SARS, and before you can even reach an agreement, SARS says, no, you pay now and then you will argue later. So we had constructive dialogue with them to show SARS that this might not be the best approach to take, but we also educated our practitioners, as we do on an ongoing basis, to say you still have your obligations that you must comply with from a professional perspective, and you need to educate your clients and contribute to the fiscus.
The next question I want to ask you, Keitumetse, is perhaps somehow related to this in many ways. Tax discussions and tax debates do not take place in a vacuum. There's always the backdrop of the political climate. And I wonder how the current political climate influences the tax policy debates that are being held and also the implementation of those reforms.
Excellent question. So on the first day, we actually had the Honorable Deputy Minister Asha Sarapen join us, as well as a member of the Standing Committee of Finance, Mr. Honorable Alan Beasley, and we unpacked that very topic, that how tax looks now in this changed, politically heated-driven climate. We acknowledged in that discussion that, of course, it has changed from what it was previously, where we had just one party run through and the budget would only have a 1.0, but now we have multiple partners that are sitting at the table. In that discussion, what comforted me is seeing that the National Treasury, or even the Honorable Deputy Minister of Finance, took off the hat of being affiliated to a certain party and mentioned there that even from a parliamentary perspective in Honorable Beasley, it is not about a political party mandate, but when they sit around the table, although it's purported not to be so, they try to reach consensus that will work for the country, irrespective of what your political affiliation is. Of course, we cannot understate the fact that we live in a time where it is politically charged. It is a heated political climate. Everybody is trying to obviously service their voter base. But that discussion brought out that the National Treasury does not take sides. It is about moving forward as a country, ensuring that the policy works for everybody who lives in South Africa. So even though we had a budget 1.0, 2.0, and eventually landed on a 3.0, that was
and that was a first for us, it really was a first for us. We've never been in that kind of situation.
Yeah, and that was actually a good thing because on the face of it, you would say, this is an Armageddon event. This has never happened before. But that showed that everybody was getting around the table. They had to communicate. They had to reach consensus so that we ended up in a situation where we all can benefit. In that, in that discussion too, and the previous discussion with Mr. Axelson and in Pumlopiani from Alex Forbes, we raised the issue that we can't run away from the fact that we need to raise taxes. Taxes is the way that we're going to drive the economy. But the shift is moving from just taxing the base to collecting the money it's there. And if everything does go well and the SARS collects the money that they've been mandated to do, we might not even see a tax increase in the next year. So there are the political debates that are going on, but we were assured by virtue of that discussion that the HATS is not about a political mandate, but it's actually about driving the country forward.
We've just had the last quarter results coming out from the quarterly labour force survey, Keitumetse. And I wonder how the results of that nature inform the discussions that you're having and the decisions that are going to be made as far as whether or not taxes are going to be increased. Because once again, we're seeing, quite a significant rise in unemployment. So with more and more South Africans being outside of, the employment strata and space, how is that going to inform or influence the decisions that are being made on your side?
Excellent question. So it's twofold here. It's a two-pronged thing. With I think it's 33%, if I checked it, 33 or odd, which is actually quite high for this quarter. There is a balance now that the Treasury and the SARS must now look at because we need to still fund infrastructure, SRD grants. There's actually a court case in the North Gauteng division of the High Court that said that the Department of Social Justice, Social Development, as well as the Treasury should find money in order to make sure that SRD grant is actually made permanent. So they've got all these pressures that are on their pockets as well, and they have to sit around the table and find money. And now with the figures coming out that it's about 33%, which is quite high, of people that are unemployed, they've got to find, some sort of funding to assist those unemployed South Africans to be able to participate in the economy or to survive on a daily basis. That is where the collection drive from SARS comes in, because when we pay the right amount of tax and they collect, that tax gap is estimated about 800 billion rand. If we can collect that money, we can pump that money into developing or unlocking infrastructure, which is one of the panel discussions that we had here that was chaired by Uleboheng Ramatlhodi from Deloitte. We can then unlock infrastructure, people can get employed, and that number, that percentage can come down steadily over the years. But it all comes down to everybody paying the right amount of taxes as we educate our members and tax practitioners here at the Indaba and continually over the year, that we must comply with our obligations so that the SARS and the Treasury can unlock infrastructure, pump money into the economy so more people can work and participate therein to grow as a country.
Keitumetse, Sesana, we'll leave it at that for today. Certainly, it's a moving train. It never stops, the kind of discussions that we're having, because the economy is constantly, in flux and movement as well. But thank you so much for keeping us abreast of the developments as well as some of the key discussions that took place at the South Africa Institute of Taxation, Tax Indaba, which wrapped up this afternoon. We thank you for your time, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. She takes us to exactly 28 minutes after 4 p.m.
Are you